For over 20 years now, MTH and Lionel have dominated the three-rail O-scale industry with their control systems and their sound systems. But recently, there's been a new product introduced to the market that is revolutionary, and I truly believe it will give MTH and Lionel a run for their money. Simply install this product in your models, and you have all the amazing sounds and features you've come to expect from a modern era locomotive. All of that right at your fingertips. The world of digital command control has arrived at three-rail O-scale. This is Blunami DCC. Hey guys, Sid from Sid's Trains here, and today we're going to be talking about a new product on the market and installing that product into an engine. That new product is Blunami DCC from Soundtraxx. One quick announcement before we get into this video. The Train Collectors Association will be holding their York TCA train show in York, Pennsylvania this month. The show is being held October 19th through the 21st. I will be there all 3 days, and I really look forward to being at the show. I look forward to buying new trains and meeting new people. I definitely recommend going to the show, and there's tons of amazing things to do at the show, buying trains, talking with people, and on Saturday, a bunch of YouTubers will be holding a YouTube meet and greet in one of the halls at the show. So I definitely recommend you trying to get out to the York TCA train show. Like most of my videos, I'm definitely more on the technical side of model trains, and so I'm going to be showcasing the installation of Blunami DCC and talking about DCC overall to showcase that to you. But if you're looking for the overall details on Blunami, the experience, and just a good overview, I would recommend going and checking out my friend Johnny over at Optimus Trains. He made a fantastic video on the overall experience of Blunami. He and I discovered this product together, and I've installed that into a couple engines for him and myself, and so he did a very good job on explaining what it's like to use Blunami and why it's really something that we should be looking forward to in this hobby. And so if you would like to check out that video, the link is right up here or down in the description below. I definitely recommend you check out his video. So what is DCC? DCC stands for Digital Command Control. Digital Command Control, DCC, is a standardized control system for model rating. You might be wondering, well, isn't Legacy, TMCC, and DCS digital control systems? Well, yes, they are digital control systems that allow you to command your trains with a digital remote or nowadays a phone. However, they are not the same standardized system that DCC is. DCC was a system that was standardized many years ago, and it works a little bit differently than Lionel Legacy or MTH's DCS. Legacy control and TMCC are sent through the air. The signal is sent through the air to the trains via the remotes through the air to an antenna on the locomotive. MTH does it a little more like DCC, where it's sent through the rails through encoded messages. However, MTH does it by sending AC power through their TIU and then out to the tracks, and that is AC power. And same thing with the Lionel trains with Legacy. They are powered by just basic AC power. However, DCC is both the power source and the control system in the sense that it sends the commands through the rails by sending jolts of power, very quick on and off jolts of power. And so if you were to look at the power to the rails, it's a bunch of signals being sent to the engine via turning the power on and off. In the world of programming and coding and digital logic, that is simply a bunch of ones and zeros. The DCC command base is turning the power on and off to encode messages being sent to the locomotive, whether that might be to make it go forward or go in reverse or to blow a whistle or to ring the bell, whatever it might be. It is sending those signals through the rails via this power source. And it's not just AC power or DC power, it's this very high frequency AC power. And so it's very different from the standard AC power that we use in 3-rail or the more generic DC power that you might see in an analog conventional HO setup or G-scale setup or even 3-rail O-scale, but we mainly use AC, and so that's kind of where we run into the struggle of implementing DCC into our modern O-scale 3-rail layouts. The challenge is our trains run on AC power, and because of that, we have to use transformers to power them. And while some of our trains, whether they might be MTH models or some newer Lino models, while they can run on DC power or even DCC in terms of the power source, there's some limitations there. MTH models are compatible with the DCC control system standard, but Lino models are not. So you would still need the Lionel command bases, and there's some issues there at times. The very high frequency AC power that DCC sends to the tracks can cause interferences with the sounds, and older models can't even handle that power, and you might run the risk of blowing up your electronics and damaging the model. However, with this new product from Soundtraxx, we're going to be able to implement DCC control into our layouts without actually having a full-on DCC system powering the entire layout. Sitting here on the layout are two brass engines made by two different companies. On the left is a 3rd-rail Norfolk and Western Water Buffalo, and on the right is a Weaver Milwaukee Road 464 Baltic. And both of these are great candidates for Blunami. Johnny describes it in his videos, but Blunami is a great upgrade candidate for model trains. It's not exactly something I expect to see Lionel or MTH or any other 3-rail manufacturer to install from the factory in their models. However, it's something good to install in models that either didn't have sounds originally, the sounds failed in them, or if it's for something like a very specific model that you want a very specific sound set for, because Blunami has a wide variety of sounds, and so you can customize that to your liking. And so both these engines in front of you are great candidates for that. The one on the left I've actually already installed Blunami into, and so like I said earlier in this video, it's as simple as grabbing your phone and just tapping a button, and you now have full control over this model. And there's all kinds of different things you can do. There's amazing sounds, and of course there's also lighting. You can turn the headlight on and off. You have individual control over marker lights if you would like. And it's overall this very fun system to use, and the sounds are really good in my opinion. So as you can see, it's a very fun system to use, and so this is something that I've been installing in more and more of my brass models because it kind of brings more life to them. It gives them more features, better sounds, and it just is a fun experience to be a part of. This Weaver Baltic over here actually has electronics that have fried, unfortunately. This engine originally came with Lionel TMCC control from the factory. Unfortunately, those electronics have gone bad, and so I'm going to go out to my workbench and show you how to install a Blunami DCC decoder into this engine. And this will apply to pretty much any 3-rail O-scale model, with some limitations that I will talk about here in a few seconds. So I'm here at my workbench to show you now how to install Blunami DCC into an engine. And sitting here are the major components that you would use to upgrade a model in 3-rail O-scale. We have the new Blunami decoder here, and as you can see, it's a very slimmed down board. It's not very tall, it's not very long, and it's not too wide either. But then you look at the more mainstream electronics. This right here is a MTH PS3 upgrade kit board, and as you can see, it's much more bulky than the Blunami board. It's much taller when it's sitting down. It's a bit longer and it's a bit wider, and so this takes up more space, and so you can't fit this in as many products as you would something like this. And the same goes for the other products out there. This is an Electric Railroad TMCC Cruise Commander, a standard board you would install to add TMCC to a model. And like the MTH board, it's definitely much taller than the Blunami board. It's a bit longer and basically the same width. And then over here is what I would be using if I was doing a legacy install, which I've showcased a few times on my channel. Same thing, it's much longer. It's definitely more slim like the Blunami board, but this is very much a long board by comparison. So this is definitely something you can fit in more models, and that's one of the things about Blunami that is so good. It's this very slimmed down decoder that you can fit in just about anything, and so that allows you a lot of freedom on what you're going to be installing it in. And luckily, this is not the only decoder they have. This is for larger engines with larger motors, like our 3RL O-scale steam engines and diesels. However, if you have a smaller switcher or some kind of smaller motorized unit, they make an even smaller board that you would install to add Blunami. And so the Blunami system is definitely very versatile and allows you to do a lot with not too much of a footprint. So this is the main the decoder that you would be using to operate the model train with Blunami. But there are some other components that you will need to obviously make the model run, have sounds, and function overall. So this is the main decoder. Something else you will need to be able to do is convert the AC power that we use in 3RL O-scale to DC power, which is what this decoder requires. And so you can do that with all kinds of products, but one of the main ways of doing that is with a bridge rectifier and a capacitor to convert the AC power to a filtered DC power. And so this is what I've been using for the most part. One thing to note about this is that this not only converts the AC to DC, but it boosts the power actually. And so there's actually an increase in voltage from the AC side of this circuit to the DC side. And so some people have said that you might run the risk of messing with this since you're putting more than 18 volts into it. However, this can handle around 7 to 27 volts. And so if you're putting 18 volts into the capacitor and bridge rectifier circuit to convert from AC to DC, the maximum voltage you'll get out in DC is around 25 volts. So you're not pushing the limits of this board in terms of supplying voltage. Another way to kind of get around this is by putting a buck converter. That's what this is called. This takes a DC power input and it will output a constant voltage of your choice. There is a little tiny volume pot or potentiometer here, and that will allow you to adjust whatever you want the output to be. And so I've used this in a couple of my Blunami upgrades, and I've done it where it puts out around 16 volts at all times. And so that is one way to do it, but obviously this adds to the overall footprint, and so it's almost as big as the board actually. And so you don't have to use this necessarily, but if you would like the I guess reassurance that you're not going to be causing any issues with this, you can use this. But for this upgrade specifically, I'm not going to be using this because I don't really feel the need, as this is really all you need to convert AC to DC power. So this will give you the power to the board, and now you could hook up the motor circuit and everything like that. But if you're going to want lighting, obviously you need lights, and so there's a couple options for lighting with Blunami. There is, of course, incandescent bulbs. You can use a 12-volt incandescent bulb with the lighting circuits, but you do have to wire a 1000 ohm resistor in series with the bulbs, as that is what Soundtraxx recommends for the circuit, and it does work really well. Another option is, of course, an LED. There is the option of using LEDs. Same thing by just using a resistor in series, and this specifically is a pre-wired LED, and so it already has the resistor wired in here, and it has some wires coming off of it. And you can buy these on eBay, Amazon, all kinds of places. I prefer to use non-pre-wired 3mm warm white LEDs for my headlights and backup lights and things like that. And the same thing as the pre-wired ones, you would just wire a resistor in series, and this is what I'm going to be using for this video. But any of these three can work for the lighting in your engine. Personally, I like LEDs because they're very bright and they don't draw a lot of current. Of course, if you want sounds from your engine, you're going to need a speaker, and Blunami uses a 8-ohm speaker, and there's all kinds of different 8-ohm speakers. There's big speakers like this. This is a standard Lionel Fat Boy. There are smaller speakers like this. There's even the mini Lionel Fat Boys, and even smaller speakers from Soundtraxx. They make little sugar cube speakers that fit in HO models and very small models overall. But most models that had sounds previously had a speaker, and it's very likely if it was a conventional model or a TMCC model, it has an 8-ohm speaker. And so that Milwaukee Road Baltic that I will be installing this into already has an 8-ohm speaker, so I won't be needing these for the upgrade. But I did want to mention what type of speaker you could use. It just needs to be an 8-ohm speaker for that sound circuit. Finally, a product that is not necessary but is something handy from Soundtraxx. This is a Soundtraxx current keeper. This kind of acts like a BCR or a 9-volt battery in a Lionel or MTH model. This allows the decoder to continue to have power through short little power gaps on switches and keeps the engine going. And so it's just a bunch of capacitors wired up, and it has a little wire that simply plugs into the side of the decoder. You can see there's this little white plug here, and so you can just take the current keeper and take that plug that it has, and you can just plug it right into the side of the decoder, and it's as simple as that. And so the Baltic won't be needing one of these because it has pickup rollers on all the tender trucks and then the engine side. But my Water Buffalo actually needs one of these because it does not, and so this will be a very handy product to have in my Water Buffalo because it likes to cut out on my switches. So for this upgrade specifically, these are the major components that I will be using. Like I said before, there's different options for each upgrade, and you can choose a combination of the components that I've shown. And there are also other features that you can have with engines, including smoke and coupler features. But in this video, I'm just showing the basics for motor control, power to the board, sounds, and lighting. Basically just the basic things you need to get your engine going and looking and running like a nice new modern model. The couplers and the smoke features aren't exactly a necessity in my eyes, and those are things you can obviously add yourself, and in the future I might make a video on installing those. But right here are the basic components I will be using to make the Baltic run again, have lighting, have sounds, and just be a very nice modern era model with Blunami DCC. So with the Baltic out here on the workbench, I'm going to be opening this up and installing those components I've shown previously. However, I do want to mention one major thing that your model needs to have if you want to install Blunami into it. It needs to have a DC motor. It cannot have a AC motor like an old post-war, pre-war, or earlier modern era model. It cannot have that. It has to be a DC motor because that is what the DCC decoder supports. I wanted to mention that before I get too far in because that's something I get asked about a lot, is upgrading older models, very old models, to these modern control systems. And in this case, unfortunately, if you have an older Pulmer motor model or just AC motor model, you cannot install this into it. But luckily, this is a modern era Weaver model with a DC can motor, so I'm going to open this up and install Blunami into it. So here is the bare frame. I have the speaker hookups and I have the 2 sets of pickups for the center rail and then the ground. And then this other set of wires is for the electrocoupler. This engine will be having its electrocoupler removed and most likely will have a KD coupler put on it soon, so it will not need that hooked up to any kind of circuit, so it'll be removed sooner than later. So I'm just setting those off to the side. But this is the platform where I'll then install the electronics and wire everything up. So next I'm going to be mounting the bridge rectifier, the capacitor, and the Blunami decoder to this chassis so that I can then wire everything up. So these components here are obviously going to be mounted. The bridge rectifier that I'm going to be using is this kind right here. This bridge rectifier can withstand a very high amount of current draw. Relatively speaking, it can take around 6 amps or a little bit more. This is needed for a 3-rail O-scale model of this size. The same thing goes with this capacitor here. It's a 1000 microfarad capacitor that can go up to 25 volts. And so these are the 2 major components to use to convert the AC to DC. And I do want to mention all the components I'll have some links to down in the description, so you can either find them at the links I send, or you can go online and find similar components. But I do want to help you out, and so you can find components similar to these to do your own upgrade. And so this will just be mounted to the chassis. It has a hole through it, so I will just reuse one of the holes that is already drilled into the chassis, and I will have a nut and a bolt that hold it down, and the capacitor will just be soldered onto the DC side. The DC side is the plus and the negative. The input side is the AC side, which have these 2 lines. And so it's easy to get things confused when it's upside down like this, but if you notice there's a little notch here, this notch is the plus for the DC and the minus is the opposite corner. And so that will be mounted here. The capacitor will be soldered to the DC side of the bridge rectifier, and then the decoder I will just end up mounting to the chassis like this using some styrene and some double-sided tape. There are 2 little holes on it, and I do plan in the future to build a 3D printed mount to mount this instead of something like double-sided tape and styrene. But for the time being, the styrene and double-sided tape is very simple and it gets the job done. So I've got the bridge rectifier, capacitor, and the decoder mounted now. Like I said, I just used one of the holes, and I used a little bit of thermal paste on the frame in between the rectifier and the frame. And there is the styrene and double-sided tape holding down the decoder. And so next I will be connecting up the power hookups. The capacitor is soldered onto the DC side of the capacitor, obviously the positive and the negative. And so all these power pickup wires from the track are AC power, so they will be going into the AC side, which I have not hooked up quite yet. I'll be consolidating these all down into 2 wires and then running those over. And then from the side that the capacitor is on, I'll go from the capacitor bridge rectifier over to one of the terminals over here on the decoder. That's one of the nice things about these decoders, is it's a little bit hard to see, but these are labeled, and the Blunami decoder comes with a little bit of information on the little piece of packaging that it's in. And of course there's the online manual for these decoders, which I definitely recommend looking at for some of the basic wiring and any questions you might have in terms of the installation. But hopefully everything I'm talking about right now is helpful in the end, and will help you complete or work on your own upgrade. But yeah, I'm going to be hooking up all the power pickups, and I will be implementing the tether, which I've pinned out from the engine side. I figured out which ones are the power and the motor and the lighting and etc. But let's go hook some of this up and get this to the point where we might be able to see if it's working. One of the really nice things about installing and wiring up one of these Blunami decoders is that you are able to just plug the wires in with these little screw terminals. So all you have to do is route the wire over to the decoder, and it's got these little screw terminals with the holes on the end. And this applies to some of their decoders. Not all of the decoders have these little terminals. This is the 4408 decoder for, specifically in this case, Steam. And so in this case, you're able to just plug the wire into the terminal, and you can just take a screwdriver and you can tighten up the screw terminal. And once it's tight, that wire is not coming out, and so it's as simple as that. There's no need for a ton of soldering onto the board. You can just wire things up directly with these little screw terminals. And these wires that I'm hooking up right now are just the speaker wires. Like I said before, all of these connections are labeled, and of course the Blunami decoder manual for whichever decoder you're using is very simple to look at. It's very descriptive and has a lot of good information. But yeah, that's just one of the very simple little touches that they added to this board to make the installation for someone's own kind of DIY project like this very simple and user-friendly. So a lot of the basic wiring is set up like I did before. I have the speaker wiring hooked up over here. I have the input AC power going to the bridge rectifier. I got the capacitor. I also traced out the motor leads, which are these blue and yellow wires that are hooked up to the board on this side. All I have to do now to get power to the board is to connect some wires to where the capacitor is connected on the positive and negative side of the DC output side of the bridge rectifier. And from there, it will then go to the board over on the right and left side of this power input. They do right rail and left rail because generally this is used in a two-rail system, and in two-rail, instead of having a center rail and the outside rails, they have a right and a left side of the rails. But all that really means is really the right rail is the positive and the left rail is the negative. That's how I go and do this, and that's how I've been told to do this based on the instructions and some other people I've talked with. And so here is the basic setup, all wired up, and I've cleaned up everything. Everything is hooked up to give this thing sounds, power, and then the motor once I hook up the tether to the engine. All these other wires will be used for lighting and smoke and other things like that. But right now I'm going to go set this onto my test track above, and we're going to turn the power on and see if we can address the engine, hear the sounds, and see if it's working properly. Okay, I got it on the test track here, and we're going to see if this powers up properly. And there we go. This is what it normally does when you start up a Blunami decoder for the first time. As you can see, there is a little blue light right on the other side of the decoder that indicates it is getting the power it needs, and these sounds will turn right on. In this case, it's the steam engine, so you hear some kind of air compressor sounds. But obviously, if you're using a diesel, you would hear diesel sounds, or if electric. It just depends on what kind of decoder you're using. So let's go on to my phone here and go over to my Blunami app. And so we're going to open it up, and it immediately starts searching for engines. And there we go. We have Blunami version 1.0. That is just the generic name that these decoders come with. So if I click connect, it is connecting, and then eventually it will connect, and it'll take me to the screen once I've tapped on it. And now you hear the dynamo kick on because I have connected to the engine. And you'll hear that little whistle just to kind of show that you've connected. And so now I can turn on the headlight circuit, and you'll hear it turn on again. The bell, the whistle is working. That's one of the whistle options, but you can obviously go into this setting menu and change the sounds, because that's one of the amazing features of Blunami is that you can also adjust all these sounds. I'm actually going to go to the master volume control and turn this down a bit. It's a little bit loud. There we go. That's better. And so I'm going to go to sounds, main sounds, and so this is a Milwaukee engine, so I'm gonna
go through this list of whistles and find one that I think is a good match for this engine. I believe one of the whistles in here is actually a Milwaukee whistle, this one. And so now if I go back, that's definitely an interesting sounding whistle for sure. And so, yeah, now I have full control over the engine. Obviously, no motors or lights are hooked up, so it won't really do much right now, but you can adjust the sounds. And do keep in mind the shell is off the tender, so it won't have as much bass as it normally would. And there's so many different things you can do to adjust the sounds and controls when installing Blunami. But for any of the control aspects of using this app, I definitely recommend checking out Soundtraxx themselves. Soundtraxx has shown off all the features and capabilities of this app to allow you to fine-tune the decoder to your liking, so I definitely recommend checking that out. But this is really good that this is working now, so let me do some more wiring for the lighting and hook it up to the engine, and we can see if I can get this engine going. So as you can see, everything is working as it should. The sounds are working, and the motor is working, and of course this bridge rectifier and capacitor are converting the AC power to DC, which is why it's all functioning properly. I had pinned out this tether since I wanted to reuse it to connect the tender electronics to the engine, and I figured out which ones were for the AC pickup wires, which I linked to the ones that are on the tender, and then I figured out which ones go to the motor. And then the rest are pretty much self-explanatory based on this model. It has a smoke unit and a couple wires that go to lighting as well. And so those will be reused for the lighting that I will be installing, and same thing with the smoke down the road. One thing I must say about wiring in regards to any upgrade is it's very case-by-case kind of basis in terms of how to do it. This is a very basic setup in terms of the space and where things are going. Sometimes you might have a lot more complicated lighting, you might have more complicated motors, or you might have a smaller tether or a bigger tether. It just depends on the model. But this is the basic setup of what you will need. And when it comes to lighting, you have several different options. You have the headlight and backup light circuits, and then you have several different function outputs which either can be used for lighting or to turn off some kind of feature like a smoke unit or a coupler or something like that. And so in this model I will only be installing lighting and smoke. The smoke I will not be showing how to hook up in this video, as that is a more complex circuit you have to build in order for it to work with the Blunami board. But for the lighting, it is what I had shown earlier. All I will be doing is hooking up lighting, which to hook up lighting with an LED, you have an LED, you will wire a resistor in series with one of the sides of the LED, and you will hook up the positive side to the positive power, and then you will hook up the negative side to the common ground, or the ground for the lighting circuit. In some models, like TMCC models, everything is just hooked up to track power in terms of lighting, other than the headlight in TMCC engines. But in the case of Blunami, you have all the different lighting outputs which are labeled, and all of those connections are the ground connections, or the common connection for the lighting. So in this case, the negative side of the LED. And then there is one joint positive, or in this case it's labeled V plus on the board. That is the power, the positive side of the LEDs or the light bulbs that you are using. And so all of them will get their own separate ground or common negative connection, which is one of the outputs, but then they're all linked together at the same V plus or power positive connection on the Blunami board. So what I will end up doing is obviously hooking up all of the negatives and soldering the resistors in series with these LEDs. Or, like I said before, you can use a pre-wired one which already has the positive and negative leads. Or you can also use a 12-volt bulb. It's just it's your own preference. It's up to you. But for all of them, you need a resistor in line, and the grounds will all go to the function output or lighting output, and then the positive side on all of them will be linked to one wire that I have connected to this V plus, and I'll likely use another wire nut like over here where I just connect all of them together. And so that's pretty much all that's left in terms of this upgrade for this video, is hooking up all the lighting. So let me hook up the tender lighting, the headlight, marker lights, and the interior lighting of the cab, and then this engine will be ready to run on the rails once more.
So as you can see, Blunami DCC by Soundtraxx is definitely a revolutionary product. It allows us to power our layouts on AC track power and then convert it to DC to then be used with these decoders. And we don't need DCC power on our layout to then use a DCC system to control the train. Instead, we're able to use their Bluetooth app, the Blunami app, to control the train, and the app has everything you need to control the engine. So you don't need a separate control system. You can just set the engine onto a layout and then run it with your phone. And the app doesn't limit you either. It actually is more helpful and more easy to use than even a normal DCC system. So I am very happy with this product, and I hope the overall install in this video was helpful to you, and hopefully you can use some of the information to do your own upgrades on your own models. Definitely check out Soundtraxx for their documentation on the installations, and also check out Soundtraxx's YouTube channel for the overall usage of the Blunami app and all the features. They have great documentation on that. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and leave some comments below on your overall thoughts of Blunami, any questions you might have, and do you want me to keep making videos on this product and installing it into more engines with more features in the future? Let me know down in the comments below. But as always, like, subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. I'm Sid, and I'll see you next time, guys.